Hello, welcome. Hello, teachers. Welcome to our April RELO Andes webinar. I see you joining live. Hello, hi, welcome. Thanks for jumping in for our April webinar. Hello there. I love when you jump into the chat box right away into the comments with where you're joining from. I'm continuing to join you from here in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. Hello from Peru. Hello, nice to see you. I am so happy to have you with me this afternoon, joining for our webinar talking all about teaching pronunciation today. Hello, welcome. Hi, Marta. Hello. From Lima, greetings from Mexico. Welcome. Hello from Ecuador, Pakistan. Hello. Excellent. Nice to see you. So we'll get my PowerPoint up here and I'll show you our goal for today. Talking all about tips for teaching pronunciation. Nice to meet you. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Katie. I'm an English language specialist, and I've been doing these webinars for a few months now, so hopefully you've seen a few, and if you haven't, you can always scroll back on the RELO Andes Facebook page to watch past webinars from me or from other specialists before me, and we'll continue with these webinars every third Thursday of each month. So make sure that you're following the RELO Andes Facebook page to know which webinars are coming up next. Oh, I still see so many people joining. Hello from Cusco. Hello from Lima. Nice to have you here. So here's today's goal for our webinar today. The goal is to redefine the goal of teaching pronunciation and to take away some tips for some activities. So hopefully you get some activity ideas from this webinar today and also a clear idea of what the goal is for teaching English pronunciation. So I'm curious as we start right now, if you'll jump into the comments, what do you think is the goal of teaching English pronunciation? Why do we teach pronunciation in English to our students? What's the purpose or the goal of teaching English pronunciation? I see some more teachers joining from Peru. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. What is your goal for teaching English pronunciation? Maybe you're cautious to put it in the comments because you know I'm going to tell you what I think in a minute. Oh, I see. Better communication. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. The goal for teaching English pronunciation can definitely be for the sake of better communication. And I'd be curious what we mean by better communication, like more clear, more understandable. I see Ingrid says to communicate effectively. Absolutely, that can be a goal of teaching English pronunciation. To increase our students' confidence, definitely. Increasing students' confidence can be a goal of teaching English pronunciation. We want them to feel confident in their pronunciation and their communication. You know, sometimes I ask this question of teachers or of English learners in general, and they say, my goal of learning English pronunciation is so that I can sound like an American. I want to sound like a native speaker, like a movie star from the United States. And it makes me laugh every time because sometimes we have this idea in our head of what American or pronunciation from a specific country sounds like. And to me, When I think about my own country of the United States, pronunciation of the English language, even just within the United States, is very different depending on where you are, on which state you're in or which region you're in the United States. I'm from the Pacific Northwest over here. I'm here in Seattle. The way I pronounce English is very different than someone from the North Central region, this green section over here, northern Minnesota, Wisconsin. Very different from the South, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi. Those states pronounce English very differently as well. So the goal of pronunciation is not to sound like a native speaker from any particular country or region. In fact, even if we think about dialects of other English-speaking countries, largely English-speaking countries like the United Kingdom, the UK has its own dialects. Scotland has a pronunciation style different from the South or the West country. It varies a lot across countries, even within English-speaking countries. I love to share this graphic. It's been around for a while and floats around often as an infographic for English teachers, that the native English-speaking population in the world is actually smaller than the non-native English-speaking population, which means non-native speakers of English outnumber the native speakers of English in the world. There are so many speakers of English in the world, and most of them are not native English speakers. Perhaps that includes you. Maybe English was not your primary language, but you speak it now as a second or third acquired language, as a multilingual person. So you encompass this area of non-native English speakers, a huge amount of English speakers in the world here on this graphic. What that means is a lot of English speakers in the world carry their own beautiful, unique accent to how they pronounce in English. Not every English speaker, native or non-native, will pronounce English the same with the same accent, because there are so many different influences on how we pronounce English, not just our nationality or the exposure to English for us or our level of English. All these factors make for this really rich, beautiful interpretation and pronunciation of English across the world. So I would say for me, the goal of teaching English pronunciation is intelligible pronunciation. Intelligible means speaking in a way that most listeners, both native and non-native speakers, can understand without too much effort and without confusion. It's not a bad thing if you can still tell that the speaker comes from a particular country or a region based on their accent, if the speaker can be easily understood by others. So the goal of teaching English pronunciation is intelligible pronunciation. It's being understood so we can understand each other. And I think I saw in the chat box, someone said exactly this. Said, our speech becomes understandable. Exactly. We want to understand each other. If you saw the promo video for this webinar, you saw that I mentioned that I speak Spanish. Spanish is not my first language. I learned Spanish in middle school when I was 12, and then I kind of lost it, and I picked it up again when I was in college. My Spanish, even though it's fluent, I do not sound like a native speaker from any one country. If you heard my Spanish, you would think, I know that this is a person who does not speak Spanish as a native speaker, but you could still understand me, because although my Spanish is fluent and intelligible, I have this, unique accent that's unique to me. The same is true for English speakers all over the world, right? The goal is to be understood, not to sound perfectly like any particular region or country or accent from any specific country. So now that we have this goal, what's the goal of pronunciation? I want to share with you a few things that affect our learning of English pronunciation. Pronunciation in English can be affected by the age of your learner. Depending on the age of your learner, their pronunciation and their ability to learn that pronunciation is different, whether you're teaching a 5-year-old or a 25-year-old or a 75-year-old, right? A learner's motivation also impacts their learning of pronunciation. Do they care about their pronunciation? Do they have that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation? A student's personality and their aptitude, of course, impacts their learning. This piece, the teaching methods, is what we can control mostly, right? How we teach English pronunciation impacts our students' ability to learn it. An interesting thought is also the exposure to that target language. So when you're teaching English as a foreign language in a country that mostly speaks another language, the more your students are exposed to the target language, to English, will affect their pronunciation. And then also the influence of a learner's primary or native language. This is especially interesting among languages that share sounds. So for example, Romance languages like Spanish and Italian share some similar sounds that might make it easier for an English student to pronounce, as opposed to some other languages that have completely different sounds. So there are a lot of factors that influence pronunciation. And just this one in the middle is the one that we can really control, right? How we teach pronunciation to our students. So think for a minute about your students. Which of these 6 factors do you think affect your students' pronunciation the most? Do you think your students are affected mostly by your teaching methods? Like if you teach pronunciation better, they will get better at their pronunciation. Do you think they're most affected by their motivation? Maybe your students are not very motivated to pronounce accurately or effectively in English. And so you think that factor really affects your students? Or maybe you think the age is the most important factor. Oh, I see, exposure to target language. Yeah, that is a huge factor. If our students only get exposed to English in our 1-hour class once a week, right? It's going to impact their pronunciation a lot. Teaching methods, absolutely. Our teaching methods do affect our students' pronunciation. The influence of a learner's primary or native language absolutely affects their ability to pronounce. Personality and exposure, for sure. All of these factors affect our students' pronunciation. And there's not really telling which one is affecting them the most. Sometimes they kind of mesh together, they affect each other. Their willingness, absolutely. You know how you have some students who are very motivated, they go home, they watch YouTube videos about English, they listen to, podcasts in English, they're very motivated, and it makes their pronunciation more intelligible because of that motivation. Absolutely, the influence of their mother tongue, their native language. I see lots of people in this comment section, all of them, right? Most of them, yeah, they all definitely impact students' pronunciation. So I'm going to share with you some of the components that make up our pronunciation of any language, but in this case, English. And then as I share some activity ideas, I'm going to return back to these components so we can see which of the activities address each of these components. So when we think about pronunciation, We think about individual sounds, word stress, where the stress is on any particular word with multiple syllables, sounds in connected speech as well. And then the rhythm of our speech and our intonation are also two important components of pronunciation. That as we learn a language and we learn the rhythm and the intonation, it helps our speech to be most intelligible. It's also important to note when we talk about pronunciation that activities where you're working on pronunciation with students need to include practice in accuracy and also in fluency. So what do I mean by that? It's easy when you're speaking English to be accurate in isolation, but it's difficult to be fluent in the real world. So for example, if I'm teaching just how to pronounce the sound I can do that easily in isolation. Teaching the way the mouth looks, where my tongue is inside my mouth in isolation, I might be able to pronounce that sound. But what's difficult is when I put that sound into a full sentence or maybe a full conversation. The fluency is just as important as the accuracy in the pronunciation. So maybe I'm using the sound in the word mother. This Sunday, I went to have lunch at my mother's house. The sound now becomes a big piece of a more fluent sentence. And I need that accuracy for the sound production and the fluency at the same time. Both of those are important aspects for our teaching of pronunciation. Maybe you've seen this before, this phonemic chart. There are so many resources, especially if you're interested in linguistics. There are lots of really cool resources where you can get really into this phonemic chart, and it might be something that's helpful for you or your students to think about the actual components of language. Ooh, I see some people in the comments are excited about this phonemic chart. You must be a linguist. For me, I think it can be really helpful to teach students how to use this phonemic chart, especially a phonemic chart that's interactive. So there are resources called interactive phonemic charts where I could click on any one of these phonemes and hear it pronounced, voiced, and voiceless, and all of that. Teaching a phonemic chart can help for that isolation of individual sounds, right? When students are struggling to produce a certain sound, I might pull out the phonemic chart so that we can isolate the sound to work on it. If the phonemic chart gives you anxiety, if it makes you nervous, this looks like too much, you don't absolutely need the phonemic chart in order to teach pronunciation, but it's a resource that you might want to use. Another quick tip before I talk about activities is to use visuals or mimicking. My favorite way to teach pronunciation is with a mirror. Like you see this kid has a mirror in his hand. If you have a mirror handy for your students so they can see in the mirror their own mouth while they're practicing sounds or pronunciation, it really helps students to understand the production of that sound, the pronunciation of the sound. Many times I try and get really close to my students and stick my mouth right in their face and say, or whatever the sound might be, right? Because once they can see how my mouth produces a sound, or we hear it on the phonemic chart, and they look maybe in their makeup mirror at their own mouth, it helps them to connect how the tongue impacts the production of the sound. Get your tongue in the right place, and it's more likely that you'll be able to pronounce that sound better. So I often encourage my students when we're teaching pronunciation to bring their pocket mirrors to class. And you'd be amazed, especially if you teach high school or university, most of your students have a mirror in their pocket. So there's a couple quick tips before we get into these activities. For any activity, you could use the phonemic sound chart or the visual look with a mirror or mimicking. I see some of you have used mirrors before. Yeah, mirror helps a lot for practice with pronunciation. It does, even for ourselves, right? For ourselves as we're practicing pronunciation. Sometimes I think about the tip if you are a nervous public speaker. So it's your time to speak in public for something, to give a presentation. Many times we practice the presentation in front of a mirror so that you can see what you look like when you give this presentation. I think now that we've done so many things remotely, we have our own picture in our Zoom box or in our, virtual meeting box. We're seeing ourselves producing all the time. So using a mirror should be something pretty easy, pretty comfortable for our students. Okay, so I promised I'd give you some activities. So I have 3 activities for pronunciation to share with you. You can change these activities to fit your age of students, their personalities, their readiness, their level. These are kind of some general activities that hopefully you can see could be applied to different learning of pronunciation in different ways. So here's the 3 activities. First, we'll talk about the rubber band stretch. Then this activity called Identify the Voice. And then the third one is called Stress Switch. So let me show you this very first activity. This is an activity that I learned from one of my colleagues, and it's often used to illustrate the pieces of a word, the syllables or the stress of a word. All you need is a rubber band. I have a hair band here. Perhaps you can see it. Any kind of rubber band. Rubber bands are cheap, which makes it nice to have for your students when they're teaching pronunciation. Hopefully you can get your hands on some rubber bands, or some students with long hair have rubber bands they could share. But what you do with the rubber band stretch activity is you use the rubber band to put the emphasis where it belongs on the syllables of a word. So I'm going to stretch the rubber band depending on that stress. It also kind of gets to the rhythm of a series of words if you want to put them into context of a whole sentence, right? I use this especially for the word stress of specific words. So for example, the word spider. Spider. The emphasis of the word spider is on the I, right? So I'm going to spider, stretch my rubber band where the emphasis belongs, right? What about the word alive? Very similar. Alive. The stress of that word goes right in the middle of the I, alive. So the purpose of the rubber band stretch is to give some emphasis on perhaps the syllable or the stress of a word. This is a really easy activity that we could do with any time that students get stuck on a word, especially a multisyllabic word, where we can put some stress or take a look at the rhythm or the intonation of that word. So thinking about the pronunciation components, the rubber band can help with that stress, the rhythm, and the intonation, just like I said. Thank you. I'm glad you think it's a nice activity. I see your ideas in the comments. It's fun. So here's another one. Maybe this is helpful for you in thinking about your students. This activity is called Identify the Voice. Now, in my experience, teaching English to Spanish speakers, especially, the TH sound is really difficult for Spanish speakers. The TH sound has a voiced and a voiceless aspect. So the voiced TH takes a different shape of your mouth. It's the V. And the voiceless TH is the theta, this is really tough for Spanish speakers because y'all don't really have this sound in the same way, right? The voiced and the voiceless. So this is an example with these voiced and voiceless. What happens is you'll listen to a word with the TH and try and decide, is this TH in this word voiced or is it voiceless? Now, if I was doing this with students in a classroom, I might ask them to hold up, like I have here in the picture, some cards with the voiced or the voiceless symbols from the phonemic chart here. Or maybe I just write on each card, voiced, voiceless. If you don't want to use the phonemic symbols, that's all right too. There's lots of ways to modify this with different phonemes as well. But for our example, we'll use the TH. So imagine we're doing this activity with the TH, and I ask you to identify the voice in the word throw. Is this a voiced or a voiceless TH? Throw. Think about it for yourself, and if you want, you can put your answer in the comment box and I'll tell you what you think. Throw. Is this a voiced or a voiceless TH? I see Harriet thinks it's voiceless. Do you agree? Throw. Ooh, interesting. Use the zeta to teach the TH. Ah, love that. Voiceless, voiceless. The pronunciation of these phonemes are difficult. Yeah, they are. Especially ones that don't exist in their native language, right? The TH is really tough. Well, you all got it. The TH in throw is voiceless. So a student who's struggling to pronounce the voiceless TH, usually for Spanish speakers, they pronounce it as just a T, tro, instead of throw. I would pull out my mirror and show a student the structure of my mouth when I use the voiceless TH. Put your tongue between your teeth and whistle the air through your teeth to make the voiceless. Let's look in our mirror, show each other our mouths, and that's how I could get a student to start to pronounce the voiceless throw. Okay, here's another example. Mother. Is the TH in mother voiced or voiceless? What do you think? Mother. You might have to sit here for a minute and try it with your mouth. Mother, mother. Is it voiced or voiceless? Yeah, I see the comments coming in. It's voiced. Yes, it is. Mother is voiced. So as I'm teaching a voiced TH to students, we take out our mirrors, look at our mouths. What's different between the TH voiceless and voiced? Well, when a TH is voiced, for me, it vibrates my tongue. Mother. That vibration on the tongue that makes this sound voiced, is how I can tell the difference between that voiceless and voiced sounds. So I can continue with all sorts of examples, right? What about this one? Voiced or voiceless? Birthday. Is this a voiceless TH or a voiced TH? Birthday. This one's a little bit tougher because sometimes when the sound is in the middle of the word, it gets a little tougher. You have to sit there and go, birthday. Harriet thinks it's voiceless. Carlos thinks it's voiceless. Yep, y'all got it. This is easy for you. That's right. Birthday has the voiceless TH. So the point of the identify the voice activity is to focus on those individual sounds. So when we're teaching pronunciation, it helps to focus on individual sounds, especially the sounds that students struggle to produce in English because of the interference of their L1 or those other factors that we talked about, right? The sounds in connected speech can also be targeted in this activity. Okay, I have one more activity for you. This one's called stress switch. So you know that this activity will focus on word stress, right? In this activity, we're using multisyllabic words, so words with multiple syllables. What I would do in this case is also maybe use note cards or something else to break apart large words into syllables. I always did this with what I called the stress hat, the word stress hat, not the emotional stress hat. It could be like a physical party hat that you put on a student. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be a hat. It could be, any sort of indicator that that student is holding the stress. I'd just like to use a hat. You could use whatever you like. So what we do is we change the part of speech of the word, which changes the word, and also moves the stress, switches the stress to a different syllable. So when we start with a multisyllabic word, we'll put the stress hat on the student where the stress is for that word. When we change the word's part of speech, we move the stress hat to where the stress of the word has moved. This one's a little more confusing, so I'll give you an example. Here's my students, my stick students in this example. And imagine the word is concentrate. Concentrate has 3 syllables, right? In this case, concentrate is a verb. We might take note of the part of speech, right? The first step is to find out, of these 3 syllables, concentrate, which student holds the stress? Is the stress on the con, on the sen, or on the trait? In concentrate, the stress is on the con. So this student, you can see, is wearing the stress hat. He's wearing the stress hat on the far left because the emphasis is on the con, right? Exactly. Now imagine if we change the word concentrate from a verb to a noun. What's the noun of concentrate, the verb? Concentration. Right. Yeah, you got it. When we switch concentrate from a verb to concentration, the emphasis of the word, the stress of the word, moves off of con. Concentrate, the stress is on con, but concentration, the stress is different. So where do you think? Where's the stress in concentration? Is it on the con, the sen, the tray, or the shun? Ooh, Nelson, you got it quick. On the tray-tion, the tray. Yeah, absolutely. The stress moves from the con and concentrate to the tray and concentration. So the activity for the students is to decide, okay, we changed the word, so now who wears the stress hat? We have to move the stress hat to this guy with the tray, right? Concentration. You could do this with any variety of multisyllabic words, and especially for those words that are long and tough for students to get, right? Students also love to do things where they're up out of their seats. So I would make sure to keep this activity active. Thanks. Yeah, it's a good activity to do with children because it gets them a little bit moving and interacting with the word and the sounds in a new way. So though this activity breaks a word down into individual syllables, it's really focused on the word stress as well. And I'd argue that it touches on the rhythm of the word as well, right? When we break apart words by syllables, maybe doing the rubber band stretch with the syllables, then we play into that learning of the rhythm. Ooh, I see Gabby says there are primary and secondary stress in a compound word. Absolutely. You could modify this activity for your higher level English speakers to be even more complex, breaking down the pieces of the word. That would be really interesting to see. So think about these 3 activities. I taught you the rubber band stretch, the identify the sound, and the stress switch with the hat or with whatever. Which of these activities would you like to try? Or like Gabby thinking, how might you modify them? How could you change one of these activities to achieve a goal you have for your students in pronunciation? Thank you, Harriet. I see students will really enjoy this activity. I'm glad you think so. I would love to hear how it goes when you try it in your class. Which activities would you like to try? Maybe you'll use one of these activities also with the phoning chart or with the mirrors. The mirrors, I think, can be used with any activity you're doing around pronunciation. They can be a resource in the moment when you need them. I'm going to try the stress switch. I'm glad that one sticks out. You like that one. The stress switch, I think, is especially fun. For me, I tried to keep some resources to help with my students' pronunciation in my classroom when I'm able, because sometimes you might not have planned to teach pronunciation, but as you're teaching something else, you notice that your students will be struggling with a specific pronunciation, and you take the opportunity to teach them a bit about the pronunciation. Oh, I see someone's going to use rubber band stretch. I think you can absolutely try them as they are and then modify them later, depending on what your students need, right? Great idea. See if you are going to use stress switch or maybe identify the voice. Definitely. So the idea with pronunciation is to remember, the goal of pronunciation is to be understood. It's intelligible speech. The goal is not to have any specific accent. Sometimes I have to remind myself of that too with my Spanish learning, because I will feel maybe sometimes a little hesitant or a little embarrassed to speak in Spanish because I know my accent is not like a native Spanish speaker. It's not like a Spanish speaker from any one country. But I remind myself that my accent when I speak Spanish is a beautiful thing. It means that I speak more than one language, and that's something to be proud of. I'm proud that I speak more than one language. I put a lot of work and effort and learning into learning Spanish. So remember that your accent when you speak English and your students' accent when they speak English, that's something really beautiful and something to be proud of. It's not something to hold us back from engaging in the language or to make us feel embarrassed. It means that you are multilingual, and that's something really to be proud of. Okay. Well, thank you so much for engaging with these activities. These are just a few of some activities we could talk about and some issues with pronunciation. Pronunciation is a very big topic, of course. So if you would like to talk more with me about teaching pronunciation, tomorrow, the 22nd of April at 2 p.m., you can join the post-webinar discussion. We have a Zoom link that will be posted for you to register on after this, this webinar. I'd be happy to hear your ideas, to see what you do with your students when you teach pronunciation. So feel free to join the post-webinar discussion tomorrow at 2 p.m. And then next month, we'll join together for another RELO Andes webinar on Thursday, May 19th at 2 p.m. Lima time. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and for trying out these activities with me today. It was so fun to see you in the chat box. Hopefully I'll see you next month, Thursday, May 19th at 2 p.m. Thank you, everyone. See you next month.